all of you this afternoon. It's always fun for us to do our Voices from the Past cemetery tour, and this is no exception. It's fun to do it here with the mausoleum because lots of folks don't always get an opportunity to come into the mausoleum, which you will have an opportunity to do at the close of this. As you remember, usually we have something that we share with you. One year we had an antique hearse out here. Another year we had Civil War reenactments. And we've done something every year that kind of shared either a funeral tradition or something about the cemetery. And this year is no exception. In fact, this year, what we are going to share with you is the history of the oldest marble works in Winfield. And by the time we have finished, if you are very, very careful listeners and very good at discerning exactly what you want to put into things, you should be able to figure out what is the oldest continuous business in Winfield. But there's different criteria that you could use, 3 different criteria. So by the end, hopefully, you will be able to maybe figure that out. So right now, we're going to welcome Mr. William Dawson, who had the oldest marble works, the first marble works in Winfield. So welcome, Mr. Dawson.
Hello, everyone. As she said, I'm William H. Dawson, but most people just call me Billy. You know, I heard Cindy talking a little bit. As I stand here, it's amazing to think that over 145 years ago, my father and I started a business that is still going strong here in Winfield, Kansas. And basically in the same location we started at 145 years ago. Back in 1858, when I was born, we lived in Iowa, and my family, when I was 12 years old, decided to move to Kansas. Well, we settled in Independence, Kansas, and my dad started a marble works business. He started to develop his trade, and I learned from him during those early years when I was just a boy. Well, as his reputation grew, so did the reach of our business. And while delivering to Wichita, he became familiar with a town called Winfield. And he decided it'd be a good idea to start a branch of Dawson and Son Monument here in Winfield. Well, at that time it was 1880, and I was old enough to run this portion of the family business. So in 1880, I relocated and we opened Dawson and Son Monument here in Winfield. In 1882, E.E. Thorpe moved to town, and he was going to try his hand at a tannery business. He built it out of a stone business stone building just on the south end of town here. And while unfortunately his business didn't work out, we used it as an opportunity. Because when he closed down in 1883, we bought that building, and since then we've made on some additions. We got some extra equipment in, and really went to perfecting our craft of marble work. We traded in all manners of Italian stones and granite and American marble, and even hired some salesmen. They started promoting our business. We started selling our monuments all over this area. We'd even deliver some stones over 100 miles away, and that's back in the late 1800s. One of my fonder memories, I was commissioned in 1891 to build a monument for a young man that passed away while trying to save one of his friends. That monument, boy, I remember making that monument, and it was a source of pride for me as I got lots of compliments. It stood at Central School on 9th Avenue for a number of years. And as I understand, it still stands at the Historical Society today and is in still in good shape. Well, to tell you just a little bit about my personal life, wasn't much of an automobile guy. I bought my first car in 1920, but didn't care for that driving thing much, so I continued to walk back and forth to work. And I had one of my trusted employees, Vernon Crop, he started driving the vehicle, and well, unfortunately, when I had a stroke in 1921, Vernon took over the business for me and started running the day-to-day operations. Well, I passed in 1929, and I left the business to Mr. Vernon Crop, and he hired a man by the name of Bob Floatman. And Bob was the one that managed the business for him for a number of years and eventually took over the business himself. And the business has been going strong, and I'm really proud of the fact that those that have managed it and owned it since me have continued to serve not just the Winfield, but the entire South Central Kansas area with the same pride and dignity that I did. Today it's run by Steve Parks and his wife, and again, they run it in a manner that is right in line with what we did 145 years ago. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson, for sharing that interesting history of this very old Winfield business. Did you know that one of the largest monuments in Highland Cemetery marks the resting place of Vernon Crop and his sister Odessa, along with a memorial stone for his father, who was interred in Union Cemetery. There'll be a flag marking that monument as you tour the cemetery later. Another interesting fact that many of you may not have known: Winfield had a hospital in the west part of town in the early 1900s. Several very skilled and well-known doctors practiced in the Winfield Hospital on 10th Street. One of those doctors is our next guest. Let's welcome Dr. E.O. Smith.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. E.O. Smith, M.D. I came to Winfield in 1913 at the behest of my brother, Dr. F.R. Smith, I'll tell you why he used his initials. You understand that my brother's real name was Flavius Rawl Smith. Now, if you had a name like Flavius, and especially if your nickname for the family and friends was Flavy, you can imagine why he'd prefer to go by his initials, FR. Nevertheless, he was already here doctoring when I came to join him. But both of us, we were initially born in the state of Iowa. And in 1874, our family moved to a farm up in Rice County, Kansas. For those of you who may not be familiar with Rice County, it's directly between McPherson and Great Bend. And consequently, I went to high school in Lyons, Kansas, the county seat of Rice County. After high school, I went to Central Normal College over in Great Bend. Such a successful college that it no longer exists. But nevertheless, I did get a teaching certificate there from that college and went to teach in Rice County. In the meantime, my brother, Flavy, had gone to medical school and become a doctor, and had actually then also, initially started to practice in Little River, Kansas, then eventually later moved down to Winfield here in the early 1900s. While I was teaching in Rice County, I worked for a summer or two with my brother in his medical practice, and that got me interested in being a doctor also. And so then I went to the same medical school as he did at Keokuk, Iowa, and got my MD in 1895. Subsequently then, I started my own practice up at Marquette, Kansas, small town up in the northwest corner of McPherson County, and practiced up there for about 17 years before coming to Winfield. Part of the reason for coming to Winfield, primary reason, really, for coming to Winfield was at the behest of my brother. And the reason for that was he had acquired this new hospital down there at the southwest corner of 10th and Manning, and he was being so successful at it, he needed more help, especially surgical help. And I had started specializing in surgery, and so I came down here to buy into that hospital with him. And it was the Winfield Hospital, as I say, located right at the southwest corner of 10th and Manning, which a lot of you folks who may be around in 2025 would probably recognize that as a green, small apartment building, which looks like it's being remodeled again, but sits right on the southwest corner of that intersection. Some of you really old timers, like this old guy sitting out here, may remember it somewhat as the Pilger Hospital, because prior to us buying it, it was known as the Helen Lucille Pilger Hospital Home. All of a lot to remember there. But we purchased it from Dr. Hoyt Pilger, and we continued to operate it then for many years. We actually expanded it somewhat, and not many people probably know what it looked like at that point, but right down here to the north is a picture of what the hospital would have looked like in its heyday. Of course, it's much smaller now. What remains, most of the western part of it, I understand may have been destroyed by a fire some many years ago after we quit practicing there and all that. But part of the building still remains there today. I continued practicing here until I got ill in about 1924 and could no longer practice, but then did die in 1926. However, the main thing is I'd been sick for many, many years. And it all happened starting at about 1906. You know, there was an epidemic going on at that time, which time I was still living and practicing up in Marquette, Kansas. And it was affecting all kinds of people around me. And I've referred to it as automobile fever. These newfangled motorized vehicles were becoming the in thing at that time. Everybody was wanting to get one or get in one. My friends and neighbors kept urging me, you've got to get one of those. Doc, you've got to get one of these newfangled cars. You need it. Well, I've resisted. I kept my horses. Because you realize up in Marquette, rather small town, I had a lot of patients, but a big share of my patients lived variously way out in the country. So if I had to make a house call, which doctors did in that time, as you know, I'd have to catch a horse or horses, sometimes when it didn't want to be caught, get it harnessed up, get it hitched to the buggy, and then trot at 6 or 7, 8 miles an hour, who knows how far out into the country. It was a little bit of a problem. Finally, I decided to give one of these newfangled car deals a try, and I bought one. And I was hooked. Absolutely hooked. I suffered from the fever the rest of my life. So I'm not going back to the horses. Admittedly, the initial cost of a car was a little more than the initial cost of a horse, but I could handle that. I just raised my medical fees and boo. But then most of my patients weren't too upset about that because I could get there so much easier. Whereas before, I could say, if we had a call or had to take a call, you had to go out and catch the horse, harness the horse, hook it up to the buggy. Once you got this newfangled car, all you had to do was go out there and whip that crank around a couple of times, and they were so good at firing right up. You got it fired up, you get in and you take off. So much simpler, so much easier. Now, admittedly, once in a while your hands would get a little greasy. You might get some grease on your clothes, but still it was a whole lot nicer. And on top of that, cleaning up after the car was quite a little bit simpler than cleaning up after the horses. So I just became hooked on this car deal. And especially, of course, I remember my first one. I mean, it was a beautiful black. It had a 2-cylinder, 18 horsepower motor, 18 horses. My gosh. Now, admittedly, I did have a little trouble sometimes getting up some of those big hills up there, but once you got to the top, you could go down lickety-split. I mean, you could hit 18, 20 miles an hour going down that hill. And so I would just love it. I said, I'm never going back to the horses. I maintained that fever the rest of my life. And got along pretty well. Had very few problems. Down here in 1914, after I had come down here, I did have a little problem one time. I was driving on Bliss Street up here when a motorcycle didn't see me coming and ran into me and kind of dented up my car, dented in up a whole lot worse than my car, broke both legs. But at that time, Bliss Street was pretty low and pretty narrow, and so it was a little bit of a problem. I'm sure since that time, of course, the city has done so much to make Bliss Street a major thoroughfare. No, there's never accidents on it anymore. It's building up to where there is never a water problem I know with Bliss Street anymore. But that was back in my time when it was not quite as good as I'm sure it has become since then. So with that, I'm certainly glad you all came out today and we can tell you a little bit about my brother, Fabi, and me, and the hospital, which was then known as the Winfield Hospital. So thanks very much for coming. Good to see everybody.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Smith. Your service to this community during those early years was so important. As we continue our tour, we come to the gravesite of George Washington Abbott, one of our Civil War veterans buried here in Highland. George Abbott was born in Portsmouth, Ohio in 1840. At an early age, he moved with his parents to St. Augustine, Illinois. When the Civil War began, he felt the call to serve. He volunteered and served with Company E, 33rd Regiment of the Illinois Infantry. One of the battles he fought in was in Vicksburg. He served 4 years. In 1870, he married Miranda Tribal, and to this union were born 4 children. Mr. and Mrs. Abbott came to Kansas in 1882 in Arkansas City. A year later, they moved to Winfield. Mr. Abbott was a millwright by trade. He supervised the building of the first flour mill in Arkansas City, as well as supervising the building of the Arkansas City Canal. George Abbott was a member of the Seaver GAR Post, and the family were faithful members of the Presbyterian Church. George passed away in 1917, and his wife Lorinda continued to live in Winfield until her death in 1925. Winfield was blessed to have many outstanding doctors in the community from its beginning. Our next guest is one of those doctors' wives, Jeanette Guy. Her husband was Dr. Samuel Jennings Guy, a true country doctor. Welcome, Jeanette.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so good to be here. I have brought out a picture of my husband. That's Dr. Guy. It's a great pleasure to visit Winfield right now to see how much this city has prospered since my passing. My name is Jeanette Perry Guy, known to my family as Nettie. Originally from Allegheny County in Pennsylvania, Winfield became my new home shortly after my husband, Dr. Samuel Jennings Guy, settled here in the autumn of 1885. 1885, can you hear that? The next spring, our little son Walter and I arrived on the Frisco. The next spring, that spring we arrived on the Frisco, and at the time, one of the newspapers, the Daily Tribune, wrote that the doctor grew a foot higher and a new elasticity was given to his footsteps in consequence. They also trusted that Mrs. Guy would like her new home. Well, actually, I did, because I stayed here the rest of my life. It amuses me now, but the other newspapers in town usually referred to me as Mrs. Dr. Guy. I don't think you use that term for doctors' wives in your day. Samuel and I grew up together in the same neighborhood in Pennsylvania, and he was born in 1854 and I in 1861. I can't remember a time when he wasn't a part of my life. His father was a strong Republican, and when his family moved off their farm, he became the commissioner of the poor and an elder in the Presbyterian church. Samuel was taught to care for others. So as a result, he decided that he wanted to be a doctor and serve people who were ill. He spent all of the time he could in the office of a local physician who took an interest in him, which was very common in those days. He also tutored students to earn money to go to college. And finally, he went to college at Washington and Jefferson College. After that, he took his first course of medical lectures in Cleveland at the Western Reserve Medical College. Then on to Rush Medical College of Chicago, graduating with the class of 1881. He first practiced medicine in Homeworth, Ohio for 5 years. Then he came to Winfield. He had the intention of establishing his profession in a town where we could spend the rest of our lives. If you ask what preoccupied me at that time, I will inform you. We married in 1882, and our son Walter was born the next year. Walter was 3 when I brought him to Winfield, and his little brother Paul was born the next year. Marriage, 2 births, the major life move. My hands were full. But Samuel worked up an excellent practice from the start. In Chicago, he had taken a course on the diseases of eyes and ears, and that was a great benefit to the community. In addition to all his medical tasks, though, he also enjoyed being involved in the community. And he also was involved in efforts promoting the welfare of the city, such as the Board of Education and the Hospital Association. He was even involved in giving parties for students, and he sang in a men's quartet, as well as being a member of the Literary Union. You know, many folks nowadays think that the early settlers or pioneers were simple-minded folk. I must counter that view. There were many residents who were well-educated or wanted to be well-educated, and they had a great desire for learning, and serving was strong. In addition to the Literary Union, Samuel was a Mason and a member of the Modern Woodmen of America, the Lions Club, the Chamber of Commerce, the Board of Education, as I said, and the Cowley County and South Kansas Medical Associations. In addition, he was a medical examiner for several insurance associations. In the early days, the physicians had to drive their buggies all over the county in all kinds of weather. But Samuel truly enjoyed the service he rendered to others. He had a cheerful disposition, enjoyed a good story, and a good joke. He was known in later years to recite stories of his experiences in the pioneer days, and took a lively interest, though, in the present-day happenings. The men weren't the only ones who were active in community affairs. My interests included the Entre-Nous Service Club and planning parties for youth, girls, such as needlework parties. I loved to entertain in my home, and I truly felt I was part of my community and the fellowship of this city. My family was the center of my life, of course. My son, Walter, followed in his father's footsteps and became a physician and was moved to California for his practice. Our second son, Paul, stayed here in Winfield, and in time we were blessed with several grandchildren. But I must admit that my heart was filled with joy when I was attending the First Presbyterian Church, especially when my husband sang with the choir. He was blessed with a high tenor voice and was very fond of music. Samuel and I were both devoted to our church. After all, we came from the Scots-Irish Alleghenies of Pennsylvania and were descendants of the Scottish Presbyterians who had settled in Northern Ireland in the 1700s. I was active in the Ladies' Missionary Society and loved to socialize with my church friends. My childhood home was one of the faith. I loved the Lord and the Bible and attended church services very regularly. Actually, the day before I died, I had attended both morning and evening services. I commented to my pastor how much I appreciated that. He spoke of that at my funeral and said many kind things about me. Now I must tell you about how much we look forward to tenting in Island Park during the Chautauqua Assembly. There were many programs, including the performing arts, lectures, worship service, religious programs, as well as recreational activities. Our Chautauqua was recognized nationally as being one of the most prominent. Island Park became a tent city. We would bring rugs and furnishings from home. It was great fun. In 1896, I had to place a notice in the Daily Courier. Lost. A yellow Brussels rug at the LCL tent. That means the Scientific and Literary Circle tent. At the assembly. Was lost in the general tearing up. Please return to Mrs. Dr. Guy and be rewarded. You know, I can't remember if we ever got that rug back. One of the many things I liked was the fact that there were women lecturers speaking on temperance and women's suffrage. Another was that the Chautauqua supported the 5 literary and scientific circles here in town, which allowed us to pursue studies from our own homes during the winter. Each year we were given a book list. For example, one year the list included books on English literature, Christian history, French, and geology. We would read these books and then discuss them in our circle meetings in each other's homes. My dear mother came to live with us in her later years. In 1903, she and I went on a trip east to visit many of our relatives. While there, we met with some of our favorite speakers who were in Winfield the previous month. The newspapers always kept up with Mrs. Dr. Guy and her mother. You see, we led a very active and fulfilling lives here. On Monday morning, March the 23rd, 1925, I died peacefully in my home at 1319 Loomis at the age of 64. It was one of the largest funerals ever held in the First Presbyterian Church. That was a great comfort to my family. My Samuel lived for 6 more years, working strenuously attending to the ill. But he developed a heart affliction and was careful, but continued to attend to his patients and hold office hours. On a Thursday evening, he went to bed, saying he would enjoy a good night's rest. However, he became worse during the night, and his doctor friends came but said he was near the end. He died the evening of Saturday, October 31, at 1931, at age 77. Earlier that same year, he and 2 other colleagues were honored by the Cowley County Medical Society for 50 years of medical practice. Also, the year before, he attended a family reunion with 150 relatives in Pennsylvania. He recalled memories of those early days. So now we both rest in this beautiful highland overlooking the city which we loved. Thank you for patiently listening to my story this afternoon. I appreciate my time with you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Jeanette, for sharing your story as a physician's wife. We don't often hear about what life behind the scenes was like for the family and wife of the doctor. This next headstone marks the gravesite of one of the earliest pioneers in Cowley County. Amos Becker was one of Cowley County's earliest pioneers, coming in 1870. He held a claim 2.5 miles southwest of Winfield in the Pleasant Valley Township. Amos was born in 1844 in Dawson, Pennsylvania. He married Lillian May Seeley at Kellogg in 1882. They were the parents of 7 children, 2 of which died in infancy. Amos was a farmer, and as such met many adversities with storms and fires. After one of these fires that destroyed much of his property in 1891, he moved into Hackney. He was best known for his dedication as Township Commissioner and overseer for maintaining the roads in Pleasant Valley Township and Hackney. Later, a road was named after him, recognizing the excellent job he had done in this position for at least 25 years. Mr. Becker was a highly respected individual, took a strong interest in the building up of the county. As a farmer by trade, he had also been an active member of the South Bend Grange. Amos passed away at his home in 1912 after being ill for several months. I think here our next guest has arrived. Conrad Andrew Radley. But I don't see any ice cream. Mr. Radley, we're excited to hear about your experiences as a prominent businessman, and we understand even a sheriff at one point?
Good afternoon. Conrad Arthur Radley at your service, known more as Con or CA to most people. Glad to be here and glad that the famous Radley Velvet ice cream has not been forgotten. Most of the folks just call me Con or CA. I was born in Columbus, Kansas in 1882. A few years later, the folks moved us to Jasper County, Missouri, where my father was a miner in the lead mines and zinc mines. Graduated from Joplin High School in 1901 and married Maud Roach the same year. All 4 of our children were born in Jasper County. Later moved the county to Jerome, Arizona, where I was employed as a miner at the United Liberty Copper Company. That was the largest copper mine at the time. By 1919, it was obvious that I needed a change. My brother-in-law, L.J. Blevins, lived in Wichita, and he had found out that the Star Dairy in Winfield could be purchased. So the 2 of us decided to go into the ice cream and dairy business. I make excellent ice cream, and L.J. was the sales manager for the Kansas Gas and Electric Company in Wichita, Kansas. And he had the sales experience we would need, so we immediately moved the family to Wichita, and the business took off from there. Radley ice cream was very popular throughout the area, as we had a sales force through southern Kansas and northern Oklahoma. Within 2 years, I bought out Blevins and was expanding both the dairy and velvet ice cream. The business was a family affair with the wife working right beside me. And in 1923, we decided to expand further, by purchasing Finney Ice Cream Company in Ark City, Kansas. In 1925, L.J. Blevins returned from Wichita and became the manager of our Ark City plant. We were one of the first dairies to offer pasteurized milk and cream, and that was in 1922. A lot of folks still weren't sure that that was the best thing to do, but our advertising always contained the words cleanliness, quality, and service. And we advertised a lot. One time, I even used our little granddaughter Joanna on the advertisement. I think that picture may have been on display today. We advise We advertise on other items as well. You may have found a few of our advertisement pieces and added them to your own collections. Radley Ice Cream Plant offered bricks of ice cream in close to 30 flavors, some incredibly unique, such as cantaloupe and fruit salad. We also had chocolate dip ice cream bars, and they were the first to offer ice cream cups. And we molded our ice cream pieces were especially popular in the holidays and special occasions, and we offered over 100 different molds to use. And we delivered our dairy products and also our ice cream. One time, a lady in Long Island, New York, saw the ad in the Winfield Daily Courier, and she ordered ice cream to be delivered to her mom here in Winfield weekly. We continued the Winfield Dairy and Radley ice cream for 19 years. In 1935, I sold the Winfield Dairy to John Elam. We were always located on South Main, where we had originally started, but I understand he later moved that business to another location. Supporting the community was always important, as we donated to help build the grandstand in Ark City Racetrack and helped the Red Cross provide picnics for the children and even sponsored the City League baseball teams. In 1938, I did run for the sheriff and won. I'd been inspired by my father, who was at one time a police officer in Joplin, Missouri. So we moved the family into the county sheriff's quarters for the next 2 years. In later years, Maud said how much she really enjoyed those years in the sheriff's office. In 1940, I took a job with the state of Kansas Highway Department, working at the Ark City Truck and Bus Port of Entry. Worked there until suffering a stroke in 1952. At that point, we moved back to our Winfield home and again became active in the community. Was a member of the United Methodist Church, the Masonic Lodge, and the Elks Lodge. Passed away at St. Francis Hospital in 1957, and beloved Maud passed away in 1965. I have such fond memories of that business and that period of our lives, and recall how the entire family worked together side by side, even behind the counter. I think that perhaps the characteristics of responsible, conscientious businessmen made the Winfield Dairy and Radley Ice Cream a respected business it was. And we have to do a little bragging. As I mentioned for you sports fans, that our daughter married Mark Kaler, and one of our grandsons, Dan Kaler, was an outstanding basketball and well known in all the coaching circles. Good afternoon.
Wow, what an amazing business to remember, and what an inspiration to hear his story and to hear of some family connections many of us may not have known. We are now moving to the site of a well-known and beloved Winfield police officer, Gus Froming. Albert Verrill Gus Froming was born in Kansas in 1911. He graduated from Oxford High School and attended Southwestern College. He began working for the police department at nights while a student at Southwestern College. In 1932, he married Zella Notestein. They had one daughter, Shirley, who was married to Lloyd Craig, editor of the Winfield Courier. In his younger days, he was well known as an amateur boxer. Out of his 45 fights in 2 years, he only lost 2 by knockouts and 3 by decision. He was named heavyweight champion of Kansas in 1932. Gus served with the Winfield Police Department from 1932 until 1977, with 35 of those years as chief of police. He served during the Prohibition and the Depression. Immediately after becoming chief in 1942, he took the initiative to crack down and eliminate the houses of prostitution that operated so freely in Winfield. Those who served under him had the highest respect for him, feeling he was the greatest teacher of law enforcement there ever was. He served as president of the International Chiefs Association, as well as the Kansas Peace Officers Association, which he had helped organize. When he retired in 1977, he was so popular that the city honored him with Gus Fromming Day, and a parade was given in his honor. In addition, the community gifted he and his wife with a trip to Europe. He was even featured in a television clip with Cake TV's Hattiesburg's People. He was a member of the International Chiefs Association, Kansas Peace Officers Association, and the Winfield Masonic Lodge, and First United Methodist Church. Gus passed away in 1991 at William Newton Hospital. Few early Winfield businessmen influenced the development of Winfield and made such a significant impact of the community than this next person, Penrose Hill.
Hello. It's great to be out among people again. It's always one of the things I enjoyed being as much as anything. One of my favorite quotes in the world was always to say, "He who would have friends must show himself friendly." I was born in 1852 to Peter Albright, a farmer, and Elizabeth Mary Hills, a teacher. My father died in a farming accident when I was 13, so we moved back to East Hampton, Connecticut, my mother's home, and was fortunate to have a lot of connections in that area. She was the daughter of an abolitionist and a book publisher, so I was able to be well educated there. I studied law with the firm of Warner and Robinson. I passed the bar at age 22. Now, my mother's family was familiar with this area. Her 3 brothers had one of the very first settlers in Cedarvale, so we followed along. In 1877, my mom, myself, and my brother Henry. I used my law degree there, started a paper called the Chautauqua County Times in 1878. That was later changed into Sedan Times, which lasted quite a while. We moved on to Sedan, and my brother and I got involved in the farm loan business. We had some seed money that we had from my law partner, Samuel Warner, and it helped establish Albright Brothers Law and Loan Office. In 1881, I met James Moore, Hartford, Connecticut. He was a capable man and a man of character, and we formed a partnership. We moved to Winfield. We thought this area was a really prime area to be able to work in the farm loan business, and founded P.H. Albright and Company on 12/31 of 1981 in a building over the post office at the northwest corner of 9th and Main. We were very progressive. We had a lot of modern items there. We had a telephone. If you want to call me now, you can give me a call. Our number was 24. We oversaw farm mortgages. We sold those back to those Eastern investors that we had contacts with. And we also felt like we needed to be fair with the people here. We were very aggressive with our rates. We began lowering the rates as we started making loans. We were almost always 1% below so many of the others there. And in 2 years, we had lowered the prevailing interest rate from 12% to 6% on farm loans in this area. One of the things I always felt very strongly about is it was not fair for loan officers to give a loan at a high value so they could make more commissions, make more money on their interest rates. I always had sufficient worth of mortgage guarantees on those rates, and I took a very reasonable commission. Honesty, integrity, and fairness were the hallmarks of what we did, and they were the important things that we tried to get through at our company. We had a very strong reputation for fairness. When we first got started, we purchased some loans from George Moore, which was the father of my partner. And we were able to move very quickly. We could close a loan in 30 minutes. I had a good eye for farm values. One time, I was out inspecting a property that had been covered by one of the Moore loans, and come out to find out that they had this really nice wire fence. I go out to look at it, came back and reported that someone had stolen their wire fence. They'd stolen the wire, they'd stolen the posts, and my gosh, they'd even stolen the stone post holes. Just no difference in those people. They did not know how to gauge property. One of the things that I always did and was very proud of is I would work with any man who had gone work with a loan. I never crowded a man who was making an effort to pay. I don't think I ever foreclosed on anybody except those who would abandon their property and give up on the loans. Try to work with people as much as I can. Now, in 1984, I had a personal failure. Henry, who was still my partner in a lot of ways, died of a kidney failure. I lost a business partner. Well, in 1985, I changed my location in Winfield. Bought a little place in 116 East 9th. I hear there's even a plaque there that recommends that right now. Some of you might have to check it out and come back and tell me about it a little bit, because I don't get out much these days. But it was really, really a nice building. We had that for a lot of years. And I was always interested in helping others and always being very progressive about what we can do. I hired female clerks, which was unheard of in the day. And I spoke a lot about women's suffrage movement. At a home of Caroline Austin Strong, widow of a man who was related to my mother, we had a suffrage movement, and I had to talk about it, and I said, when women have the responsibility of government, they will vote as intelligently, if not more so, than men. There were a lot of good things about that visit there at that home, because she had 3 daughters, one of them was Emma. Well, we got along, and a year and a half later, I married Emma Strong on March 21st of 1887. She was also a very educated woman and very progressive, and interested in civic, cultural, and educational affairs. We had 3 kids, Caroline, Penrose, and James. That's about my business stuff and the business sense that we try to have, and we kept that business growing for many, many years. But my real interests lie in developing this community and doing things in this area. I was elected to the city council first in 1886. I served several terms there. I was mayor twice. I served as the Water and Light Commissioner, supporting many of the municipal utilities we had. I played a primary role in getting an adequate electric generating plant here, and I improved the water supply from what we used to have in surface water out the Walnut River, and we got into the aquifer of Ark Valley, the Ark River, and used that. Over 40 years in Winfield, I held positions in 22 different years in different positions in government. All of those at no salary or nominal salary. I helped bring in railroads. It's one of the reasons why I felt like this was a really strong area. There were 2 railroads here when I came, but I helped bring in 2 more, and we ended up with 5 railroads here at one point in time. Made for a very good connections to our connections we had back east, and it worked out very well. Also got involved in the movement to establish the Winfield Commercial Association. I think you've later changed that to the Chamber of Commerce. Became vital for the growth and development, although it was pretty much a social club when we first got into it, but we made it into quite a development for the growth of the community. Prairie Oil Company was one we brought in early for early oil exploration. Started some of that we had going on here in the community. As you might guess, with my farm backgrounds and farm loans, I always supported agriculture. I was the county fair president and treasurer for about 7 years. Very important to have crop diversity. I tried to introduce cotton. I did introduce alfalfa, a drought-resistant sorghum to this area. Started an Albright Farm and Ranch Journal where we were able to talk about the things that were happening in the area. Also established Albright Gardens, placed near Kellogg and Vernon Township to develop new irrigation techniques, livestock breeding, horticulture experiments. One of the things we did that I know my great-granddaughter will be very proud of, we brought in catalpa trees to Winfield, and I planted many thousands of trees in this area. As president of the Board of Managers of the Winfield Chautauqua Assembly for 3 years, we purchased Island Park. I personally carried that debt for a period of time because we knew how valuable that was going to be. I was a member of the school board for a lot of years. We built Irving and Lowell schools while I was president. Some of you older folks might remember those schools. They've been around a long time. I was a leader in a long campaign to build a public library, secured the land, planned the building, oversaw its construction. I was the first president of the library board for 4 years, and that library was open to all of the county, not just the city. Southwestern College is another very important element that we worked with. I was a longtime trustee of Southwestern College, the largest local contributor to building Richardson Hall. That was one of the tragedies we had with that fire burn, and you can see it really well from up here, where the fire went up there. But again, the people of the community in Southwestern College came back together and built that and made it stronger than ever. While I was not a churchman myself, I contributed to nearly all the churches in the area, supporting construction efforts for a lot of them. I was very active in trying to establish a cemetery on the Cemetery Hill, donating land at 15th and John for Albright Park. Been involved in a campaign to bring a modern hotel to this area, 4 stories high, built in 1918, the LeAnne. And later, as I was tuned into those times, I finally got up, stepped away from my business a little bit. I allowed my son-in-law, Grover Collins, to take over their business, and in 1913, day-to-day operations. And from there, it's been a great run. I do hear a few things happening up here anyway. James, my son, eventually took over as president there, who turned it over to his son, Norman Albright, and that's turned over to his son, my great-grandson, Jeffrey Albright. That became the longest-running family-owned business. It's 144 years of family ownership of the business, Albright and Loan Company. Jeff recently retired this year, but sold it again to keep the community, and it's still a company that you'll find downtown. I traveled a lot more during those years, later years, and one time when I was down in Galveston, Texas, it finally struck me the same disease that had struck my brother. I died of kidney failure down there. But I came back here to be buried at Highland Cemetery, which is only fitting because I worked to establish Highland Cemetery with Colonel Manning and Charles Roberts in 1906, so it felt like the right place to come and rest my bones in a community that I love. Thank you very much.
Thank you, PH, for sharing a bit of the history of this long Albright business, presence in Winfield, and then showing how your upstanding character helped shape not only your business, but also Winfield. We're rounding the corner toward the north end of the cemetery and the last grave sites we will be visiting today. At this grave site, we'll remember 2 sisters that had a lasting impact on downtown Winfield. The McCon sisters, Ollie and Fanny. Ollie and Fanny Cusick came to Winfield with their mother, Martha, and siblings from Crocker, Missouri in 1909. After graduation, Fanny worked as a telephone operator, and Ollie clerked for Holtke Bakery Company for 7 years before purchasing the business. Both girls married brothers, who owned the McCon Bakery on South Main. The marriages of both girls later ended in divorce. Their bakery business was in the back of a business at 920 Main Street, and they grew a profitable bakery business there from 1917 to 1935. In 35, they moved across the alley to a double business building at 114 to 116 East 10th Street. Their business grew to the largest sanitary bakery in this section of the country. They employed 10 people with 2 delivery trucks. One truck delivered bakery items to local stores, and the other delivered to area stores throughout Cowley and Sumner counties. They eventually added a lunchroom to the business. In 1927, the sisters sold their bakery business, but continued to operate the lunchroom until 28, when it was sold as well. In later years, the sisters opened the Pioneer Cafe in the old Baptist drugstore on Main Street and maintained a well-established business for 10 years before closing it. Both sisters remained in Winfield until their deaths. Ollie passed away in 1970 and Fanny in 1981. And now, with reached the final gravesite of the afternoon. This is the story of the oldest business in Winfield that is not only located in the same place, but also in the same family. The Kyger story. Please welcome Kyger Beach to tell us his story.
Good afternoon. I'll be speaking from the standpoint of my great-grandfather, Ed Kyger, commonly known as E.O. Kyger. We've managed to keep the Kyger name going on through the generations. As E.O. Kyger, I was originally from Frankfort, Indiana, and I got a wanderlust and I ended up in Winfield, Kansas. That was about 1880. So I worked for a dry goods store, and I realized the potential and the strong possible future for Winfield. I convinced my parents, Ira Kyger, my mother Mary Kyger, to pack up, sell the farm, and move to Winfield. We have great productive farmland here, we have water, and they moved here, along with my brothers Pence, Sam, and Perry. So, about that time, they get moved here, they used the farm money, and purchased a building on East 9th Street, and that became the first Kyger Furniture Company. I saw the potential with all the newcomers coming in, people setting up homes, people relocating here. They needed furniture, they needed rugs, they needed mirrors, they needed dining room tables, bedding. It was a great opportunity for retail, and so that's what it became. And during about that time, all the furniture manufacturers were telling me, well, we also make coffins. So why don't you become an undertaker? So, well, I took them seriously, and shortly after 1890, I let my father and Pence operate the furniture store while I went to the Chicago School of Embalming. And while there, one of the instructors told me, you don't look old enough to be an embalmer. You need to grow a beard. Okay, I did. I still got to be an embalmer anyway. So I noted that there were many deaths in the community, and so becoming an undertaker was a natural fit. Many of the furniture manufacturers were also sending me coffins, and so I set up my first undertaking business at 1016 Main Street. That's where Trucks and Treasures is now located. And my assistant lived upstairs, and that's where we had the funeral parlor. And so I graduated from the Chicago School of Embalming and became a mortician. So it was quite a change from being a retailer to a mortician, but it worked. I met and married Clara Cooper, previously of Latham, Kansas. We had two daughters, Catherine and Margaret. Margaret was born in 1903, the same year that I had the unfortunate opportunity to bury a number of Winfielders who were killed during the mass murder at 9th and Main Street during one of the city concerts. Fortunately, they were not seriously injured during that time. For the funerals, I had two rigs. I had a white wagon with white horses and a black wagon with black horses. The white one was for women and children, the black one was for men. About that time, World War I came around, and not only were we dealing with burying the soldiers, people coming home, and also at the end of the World War I was the Spanish flu. And during that time, I was exhausted taking care of people. I'd be called out in the middle of the night, many times to rural farms, to embalm one of the family members, literally on the family dining room table. So I sold the business to the Swisher family in about 1920. And during 1920, Prohibition hit. Alcohol sales were banned. Couldn't buy beer anywhere. Now remember, I'm a devout Episcopal Methodist and a member of the Oddfellows Lodge. I don't drink, but I'm also a retailer and a businessman. I sell good stuff to good people. And during Prohibition, I saw a wonderful business opportunity. I sent my brother Pence to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and to the Chicago furniture market to not only buy the new introductions, new colors, new fabrics, new furniture, but also to make connections with the Canadian imports. Canadian Scotch, Canadian whiskey are very popular. And it's very easy to ship those in various chest of drawers, cedar chests, rugs. I never had a complaint. So about that time in the late 1920s, my daughter Margaret married Lloyd Veatch. Lloyd was a chemist working for American Eagle Flour Mill. And he was frequently asked to verify the cleanliness and purity of the moonshine. And there was moonshine in Winfield. Lead poisoning was always a possibility, and so he was asked to make sure that it was safe. So Clara and I built a small home for Lloyd and Margaret as they were planning to have a family. And while visiting one hot summer afternoon, we heard some very strange noises coming from the attic. I thought there was a possible electrical problem, as there was popping and bursting sounds, and then we heard shattering glass. I insisted we investigate whatever this potential danger was, and I discovered Lloyd's propensity at brewing beer. So I guess it paid to have a chemistry degree. Margaret and Lloyd had a tumultuous relationship that ended in the 1930s. Lloyd eventually remarried and moved to Wichita, but my daughter Margaret never remarried and lived in the couple's home, second home at 609 East 12th. Margaret continued to work at Kyger Furniture until almost 1980. She would attend some of the furniture markets to determine what new merchandise would be appropriate for Winfield, both color-wise, style-wise, and durability. And it's during one of the San Francisco markets that her grandson, Rick Veatch, and his wife, Charlotte, met an elderly salesperson who recognized the Veatch name. I believe his name is Robert Woods. And he asked about Margaret. Sure enough, that was my grandmother, I told him. And it was obvious as he smiled, he had a very good memory of her. So, I guess we're not always angels. So, my home was located originally at 501 East 11th Street in town. The house still stands. At one time, Bruce Rogers and his family owned it. The house had a beautiful copper roof at one time. And we all know that copper conducts electricity. Well, one stormy night, Clara was standing at the kitchen stove when the house got struck by a lightning. She literally flew backwards about 10 feet. She lived to tell the story, but after that, we no longer had a copper roof. So that's the story of the Kygers. There have been 6 generations working there, and I'm proud to be part of it. Thank you.
We want to thank all of our wonderful voices from the past this afternoon and the interesting stories they shared. We do have one announcement to make prior to you beginning the tour of the cemetery. Mark your calendars, November 11th. The Memorial Park Monument and Memorial Park will celebrate its 100th anniversary, and a special program is planned for that morning. So watch for those details. There will also be a special Veterans Day concert that evening by the Winfield City Band and others at Southwestern, so watch for those details as well. So now, for the tour, we would like to invite you all into the mausoleum, where our reenactors will be inside to visit with you. You're welcome to come up the steps, or if it's easier for you, you can come up. There's the sidewalk over here. And then after that, you can enjoy the grave sites of the different folks featured here today. They're marked with flags out in the cemetery. You should have received a handy-dandy map, like so, and it is really well marked in red with the different grave sites of the folks we talked about today. Due to the wind and just the distance, the size of the cemetery, all of that, we're not going to walk it. So we just ask that you take the map and you can drive to the different locations if you're interested about it. So with that, I'll invite you all in to visit with the reenactors.